Volkskrant recognized you as the most influential Dutch citizen in 2018, and we wanted to start off non-confrontational, simple question. Do you feel powerful?
No, not at all. And let me correct immediately. The most influential Dutch person does not exist, and for sure it's not me. But I don't think that anybody is the most influential person. So don't take this too serious.
Okay, we will not. So we actually want to start off with a few short, more informal questions to get to know the man behind the CEO a bit better. So we were wondering, what do you prefer, flying all over the world or being here in the Netherlands?
Flying over the world.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, and landing also from time to time.
So when talking about transportation, do you prefer going by bike or by car?
By bike. But not all distances are easily to be reached by bike. Today I came by car. But if possible, yeah.
Okay. And when we're talking about sports, do you prefer football or sailing?
Hockey.
Hockey.
All right. Why? Did you play hockey?
Sailing would be best, would be second. I did a lot when I was young. I never played football. And the rest of a virtual team would say rightly so. But football was not my sport. No,
Okay.
I played field hockey and I've done sailing a lot, yeah.
Okay.
After a long day of sitting, or not sitting, but playing hockey, you want to go back to home, probably sit on the couch. Do you choose reading or Netflix?
Reading. I don't have anything with this binge watching and Netflix and this long series. My wife recently said we should do that also because many of our friends watch a whole evening a series of whatever, and I never did that. I don't have the time or the rest or the appetite to sit a whole evening and watching one series after another. I never understood the fun of that.
So what was the last book you read?
The last book I read, Homo Deus.
Okay.
Deus.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
If you had to go back, would you choose social or natural sciences?
Social or?
Natural sciences.
Well, I like both, but I'm a biologist by training, and I like biology an awful lot. If I would redo my study and I would be a student again, I would absolutely do the same study. Biology, and especially on a molecular level, it is still, I found it fascinating at that moment in time, and I still found it fascinating. The fact that we sit here together with the audience and how we ever existed out of two pieces coming together and creating a whole human being, that we have senses to hear each other, to communicate with each other. The processes which are happening right now whilst we are sitting here, breathing, listening, understanding each other in our brains, it is fascinating what's happening. So complicated, and it all works. And it looks like, oh, we have a chat on a couch, easy stuff. Biologically, not easy stuff at all. And I found it fascinating.
We just spoke about biology, but you've used your molecular degree to get a position at DSM as CEO. And one of the things that DSM does very well is the 3P model. So people, planet, and profit, where you prioritize not just the profit, but there's importance for the people and the planet as well. And if you really had to choose, would you choose people, planet, or profit?
No, I would choose people, planet, profit.
Yep.
Because it's not one or the other. It is not people and not the planet and not the profit. It's not profit and not the other two. It is all three. And why do we need all three dimensions? As a company, we are not a charity foundation. There's not anybody who brings Friday afternoon a truckload of money, dump it at our front door and say, spend it for whatever. That could be a good business model, but we didn't invent that. So we need to earn our own money, and if we don't earn our own money and don't make profit, if we don't make profit, it's over, game over. So of course we need to make profit. But the economy has never been invented to make money. If the only goal for an organization is to make money, that's a rather silly goal. Now, there are many organizations and many companies in the world who define their existence and their purpose as to make money for their shareholders. But to make only money is a rather silly goal in my perspective. Because the economy was invented, one guy was good in catching buffaloes, the other in growing crops, and they thought instead of doing both, each of us, why can you not specialize in growing the crops and you catch the buffaloes and we exchange? And then a third guy came and a fourth guy came and we need to exchange and become more complicated, and we invented gold, and then we changed gold and put it on the bank, and we invented money, and then we destroyed the money and we put it in a computer, and everybody trusts that what is in the computer is true. And that is the economy we have today. But the goal, money is a mean. And a mean for what? A tool to live happily here all together. And therefore, the other two dimensions, people and planet, are very, very relevant to take care of society, all the people of the world, all 7 billion people, and to take care of the planet also a little bit, because the next generation, all of you, especially here, and your kids, need to live here also.
Yeah.
So for me, it is all three. And it is not making money and doing not too bad on people and planet, like some companies say. No, it's doing all three well.
Okay, so we note that down. When talking about our generation, you take up lots of big challenges in the world when working together with the World Bank or with the world's, like the World Food Program. And we were wondering, out of all these big challenges, what do you think is the most challenging one, the biggest challenge we face in the coming decades?
The world is not short of challenges. There are many challenges. I don't know what is the biggest one, but if I list a few, and we are all engaged in those. We feel that we live happily here together with 7 billion people. Of these 7 billion people in the world, there are 1 billion who go to bed every single evening hungry, together with their kids, and they are not so sure that themselves and their kids will be alive 2-3 days from now because of shortage of food. Is there a shortage of food in the world? No. Is there a shortage of money? No. Is there a shortage of distribution systems? No. Can we provide the food to them? Easily. The only thing is those people don't have a vote. They don't count. They cannot raise their voice. And the world is not taking really care of them. I found that unacceptable. And I hope that this generation in 25 years will get rid of hunger for all in the world. I think it's unacceptable. We abandoned slavery. We abandoned many things over the decades. And I hope that we will abandon hunger also. It's one of the big challenges we have. The second big challenge, I think, is maybe climate. The climate change which we are causing, climate has been changing always. But the speed in which it's changing right now, and the overpopulation we have in the world, that people cannot move easily from one area to another area anymore, need to result into a rapid address of climate change. And maybe connected to the hunger, maybe the third topic, if I am allowed to mention three instead of one, is inequality. The fact that the 8 richest people, so row 1, maybe row 1 of this, have an equal amount of money as another half of the world. And maybe there are people in this row 1 who belong to that group. No, not yet. But isn't that weird? Isn't that a little bit weird?
Yeah, I agree.
So, what you just mentioned, malnutrition, climate change, these are clear problems that we all have to face, especially as young individuals that are naturally worried. But sometimes a degree doesn't offer as much. Apart from a written degree, what can we do as young individuals to empower ourselves best to solve these problems?
To solve which problems?
Malnutrition, climate change, inequality.
I don't know. You decide. I'm not going to tell a next generation, for sure not a next generation, what to do. I don't want to tell anybody what to do. I do my own things out of my own belief. And I would like to escape from the arrogance to tell other people what to do. If I take that arrogance, I would rather do it to my own generation than to tell a next generation what to do. I mean, the next generation should determine themselves what they want to do. If they push and ask me my advice, I would say, you know what, I had the same discussion with my two boys. One is studying University of Utrecht and the other in Rotterdam. And they said to me during the holiday, what do you expect of us to become later? And as a good father, I said, I don't expect anything. I will be happy if you are happy. Your father has no expectations about the children. You have your own life, and I have zero expectations. And my oldest was looking to me, really? I said, yeah. And my wife was also looking to me like, okay. And said, okay, I don't agree with myself. I have expectations. And what do I expect to represent the next generation by my own children, same age? And said, I expect you to do 3 things. That's more than 0. I expect you to have a look to who you are yourself, all of you. What kind of competences do you have? You got your body and your brain only once in your life, unless you believe in reincarnation. You can use it another couple of times, but otherwise you only have it once. Have a look what is inside in your body. Have a look what is collectively in your generation inside in you. And have a look to your competences. That's one. It would be a waste if you were 70 and still didn't unwrap the package being yourself. The second thing is, have a look where your passion is, where your vision is. What do you want to achieve? What kind of world you want to live in? How you want to shape that? And the third thing I expect you to do is to see whether you can combine those 2 things. What is your passion? What do you want to create? And what do you think is in your generation or in you individually, your capabilities to do that? And if you can combine those 2 with your own competencies, individually and as a generation, together with your vision of what kind of world you want to live in, and combine those things, I think you will be a happy person. And that's the only thing I expect. And
when did you find that out for yourself?
Gradually.
Sorry?
Gradually, step by step, step by step. As I said, I was fascinated by and still biology and life. And I wanted to study biology. And then after biology, I thought I want to go also into a company. And then I studied biology in Utrecht, and then I went to do MBA in Rotterdam. And then I had a combination, and I wanted to work in biotechnology. And I applied for a job with Heerlen, by the way, who refused me. Was a little bit a setback, but I told them that a mistake must have been made. And they said, shut up, we are not interested in you. I said, it can't be. Can I meet you for just 10 minutes? and they allowed that to happen, and I stayed 40 minutes, and then later on they gave me a job. And gradually I made a career, and I thought, hey, I get a more important, I hate the word, position, I get more impact.
Powerful.
I get more power. And then I thought, hey, if you get more impact, if you get more power, so to say, I like impact more than the word power, but okay. If you get more impact and power, for me, automatically, you should show more responsibility as well. Nothing is more dangerous than people who have a lot of impact, a lot of power, and don't use the responsibility going together with that. Because if you have more impact and more power, you can have more influence on the life of other people. So if you have impact and power, you better show a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous for society if that is not in sync. And I thought, step by step, hey, I have maybe more and more impact. I should use it also for shaping the world and leaving the world in a little bit better mode.
Yeah.
I always depict for myself, especially last 21 years. My oldest is 21. It went easier with having children, but they represent all the children of the world as well. But I thought when I die and retire, opposite order, retire first, hopefully, and then I picture myself, my last days of my life, and I will have a discussion with my 2 sons and my wife, and they will say, you had an important position, and what did you do with your life, etc. If the only thing I can talk about is, the share price when I started, and the share price when I ended, and the EBITDA. Now my oldest is doing economics. I hope he knows what EBITDA is, but the youngest is doing molecular science, so he has no clue what EBITDA is. And there's profit. Well, why do you call it profit? Well, it's economics, etc. All complicated. If I only talk about those things, I would not be satisfied. I hope I will talk about how was the world looking like when I was young? What did we inherit from our parents? We had a happy life, but we tried to leave it a little bit better behind. We tried, and you judge whether we did, and you can build further on this. I hope I have that discussion, and not any discussion about just profit or whatever.
Yeah, and you do that partly via DSM.
Yeah.
So let's maybe do one step back and talk a bit about what DSM does, because they're currently market leader in the production of ingredients for nutrition, but they're also involved in lots of other activities. So could you maybe shortly explain to the public what DSM does?
Like you said in your introduction, we started as being the most polluting industry in the world, in this country also, being a coal mining company. 117 years ago, set up by the Dutch government. In the 60s, 40% of this country was dependent on DSM in its heating. We all use coal. We changed. We became a chemical company on time, because the government found gas in the northern part of the Netherlands and immediately closed down the mines. See what is happening today, by the way. In 10 years, in the 60s, this country changed from being dependent on coal into it's dependent on gas. In 10 years' time. It's very interesting to look where we are right now and where is the journey for the coming 10 years for this country. We became a chemical company, and the last 20 years, when I was at DSM, we became a science-based company. And what do we do today? We're the largest food ingredient manufacturer. So everybody who eats from time to time, please do. And most likely use one of our ingredients, most likely nutritional, healthy ingredients. That's one thing. And the other thing is what we do. We make materials and things for making energy more sustainable, solars more sustainable, second generation biofuels, making electronics greener, sustainable materials. And that is the company of today.
You mentioned that when the Dutch government found gas, that required a transition from coal to a different energy source. But
yeah.
In regards, that doesn't actually address why DSM became a sustainable one. Can you pinpoint an exact moment where DSM decided to become sustainable?
No, I don't know coincidentally, but it was almost the moment I entered the company, or it was the moment I entered the company. But also because DSM thought at that moment in time, would we be as a bulk chemical company, would biotechnology and bio not have a huge impact on the chemical industry, and would we not need biotechnology as an impact on the chemical industry? And via that route, I joined DSM, and I agreed that biotechnology might have an impact on the chemical industry, but I went later on, when I became member of the managing board and later on CEO, a step further and said, but we should get rid of the bulk chemical industry for two reasons. One is a business reason. I believe that the people in the Middle East who have oil and gas coming for free out of the ground would enter the chemical industry and would be much more competitive than we are. So a strictly business reason that I say, hey, we will not be the most competitive and best player.
And it happened, right?
And it happened. The other thing is I found it a very cyclical business. One day you make a lot of money, the other day you make no money, and then you cannot easily steer the company. And the third reason is the visionary part of it, is that I thought, but the world will change. The world will become more sustainable. The world will not continue to pollute itself. And it would be weird if the world would not spend a lot of its money into improving itself. And I saw, also from a business perspective, I can make the world better and simultaneously run a business. Because it would be strange if the world would not spend a lot of money on improving itself. I would not advise the world not to do so. So I saw a business model in making the world a better place.
Yeah. Okay, maybe let's move to the audience for a moment. Is there someone from the audience who has a question to Mr. Sijbesma?
Thank you, Ms.
Oh, wait, maybe wait for the public microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Sijbesma, for doing this interview. My name is Wouter, and I'm studying the Masters in Leadership and Management. My question is as follows. As has been told in the introduction, Royal DSM has transformation and change in its genes. Lots of transformations from being a coal company to a sustainable company. And you have been selected as the most influential Dutch citizen. Can you talk about the leadership strategies or methods that you use and consider to be effective in these organizational transformations?
Transformation. It starts with a belief. I was trained as a biologist. And I've been growing up with Darwin. And Darwin wrote maybe one of the most influential books, talking about reading a book. If you still want to read a book, read The Origin of Species, where we all come from, the evolution. And Darwin writes in the midst of his book, famous sentence, everybody knows it, to my own surprise, comma, to my own surprise, Darwin was really surprised. It is not the strongest, it is not the biggest, it is not the fastest, but it is the fittest who will survive. And that sentence had a big influence on me during my whole life. And the fittest is not the one who went the most to the gym, but the fittest in the English word to fit in, the one who is the most adaptive, who adapts to a changing environment. Everybody's environment continuously changes. And you will only be successful as a species, as an organization, as an individual, if you adapt, reinvent yourself continuously. So that is one. That is the belief. I have a belief in reinventing yourself, myself, the organization, adapting. Adapting to remain successful, to remain impactful. It's the only way in my philosophy. So, how to transform? You need to have a vision. You need to know where to go to. How do you develop a vision? By observing. I travel a lot. I speak with a lot of people. And how do I develop my visions, my ideas? By getting input, by observing, by listening, by watching, by talking with people. I develop my ideas where to go to. And then with that philosophy and vision, I try to get the troops with me. By sometimes pushing them, sometimes seducing them, sometimes telling stories.
How do you seduce them?
By gaining their hearts, by touching their emotions, by letting them feel pleasant or guilty or whatever, because people are much more driven by emotions than driven by rational arguments.
So you make use of your biology knowledge, essentially.
Well, in psychology, to be honest. Because you cannot transform a company, transform an organization, or this country, if we need to go through a big transformation right now, if we do it only via rational arguments. There are all kinds of rational arguments sometimes to move from A to B. But if the feeling is not there, if the emotions is not there, if the necessity is not felt, that the necessity is there, people don't move. So you need a lot of communication skills, you need a lot of social skills to move an organization from point A to point B.
All right, we want to move a bit back to the 3P model, which you said just now that there's companies that only maximize profit as opposed to the people and planet, and that's not something you do. You include all three. But on parallel, countries also use a different measure to measure economic well-being, which is GDP. As opposed to this model, do you think there's a better model to recognize the well-being of a country as opposed to gross domestic product?
Oh, absolutely. I think it will even happen. There are some very important people standing there in the back of the room teaching here and being dean and professor of this university in economics and business administration. Yeah, I'm talking to you guys. And I think what this world did is we set up clear accounting standards. Dutch GAAP, US GAAP, IFRS, etc. So in the finance area, we have clear definitions, what we call good and bad, what we call profit and turnover and balance sheet, etc. And we got quite some metrics agreed amongst ourselves. Also between countries, like you say, how to call yourself successful, GDP, GDP growth, GDP per capita, etc. But in terms of sustainability, whether we really take care of our society or our planet, we have various ways of measuring, talking about it. Everybody has his own system, totally incomparable. Everybody has his own story, also totally incomparable. And I think there are many attempts to fine-tune that and to align that between companies, between countries. And I think in the next 10, 20 years, there's a lot to be done by economists, by business people, by universities, to align those metrics and to talk about these things in a more comparable way, but in a different way than only looking financials and financial growth as the way to define our success or to define our future. Once again, the economy was not invented to make money. And the only well-defined metrics we have is a money component. And that's weird, because this is the way we measure it. In a way, it is not the purpose and the goal of our own economy. So why you measure the mean and the tools, and why don't you measure what you want to achieve? And that switch we still need to make.
And what would be a first good step to make that transition to other metrics?
Well, have a look to your environmental footprint. And increasingly, it is happening that companies need to report, but they're all different standards, about what is my impact on the environment, what is my environmental footprint, to what extent I contribute or don't contribute to the world. Increasingly, funny enough, investors are also asking for that. There's a new initiative by what's called climate-related financial disclosure, where companies increasingly in an aligned way need to report to their investors about to what extent climate themselves and climate infecting themselves financially. And I think that's a good step. We are not yet there, but good steps to make progress on the other dimension than only the financial dimension.
Yeah, and when talking about that financial dimension, do you think that the model DSM now uses, do you think it maximizes your profit?
No, I'm never looking to maximization of our profit. Maybe, I don't know what I'm quoted here, but oh gosh.
No, but of course you're not.
I don't know how many investors are in the room, but I don't think even that companies should look to profit maximization. If I look to profit maximization, I stop all R&D, I stop all future. In China, I'm allowed to pollute many rivers. There's no law. Many of my competitors do. We don't. It would be cheaper. So I'm never looking to profit maximization. But I'm looking to profit optimization, but not maximization.
But most shareholders will probably look to profit maximization. So are you just lucky with the shareholders you have, or?
I'm very lucky with the shareholders I have. If there are any in the room, I'm very happy with that. Now, there is a time dimension here. Shareholders who look to profit maximization, in my view, can per definition only look to the short term. And if you are a short-term investor and a short-term shareholder, you can look to profit maximization, because you maximize the profit, you sell your shares, you move somewhere else, and you are happy. If you are a long-term investor, and I need to work for my long-term investors, and I need the company is 117 years old, I hope we will last another couple of years, I need to look to a longer term. If you look to a longer term, per definition, you cannot maximize then your profit on the short term, because then there is no long term. Not for the company. By the way, it applies to the world as well. So I'm not looking to maximization. I'm looking to find an optimal balance between the short term to the long term, an optimal balance between society, planet, and profit. I try to balance those things. And that makes my job sometimes, I don't complain, but it makes it sometimes complicated, or finding balances, or dealing with trade-offs, or whatever. But life is a balancing game.
At the One Young World Summit, you talked about how there's no demand that will be there coming from millennials to, they won't buy your products, they won't work for the companies, so companies are forced to be sustainable. But just like you're saying, you aren't interested in profit maximization, but I think it's a notable concern as young individuals. To what extent do you think that businesses will take this 3P model and they'll do it not because of genuine interest for the people on the planet, but rather the profit that they can get from such a green image of being for the people on the planet?
Yeah. This so-called greenwashing, to talk nice, but not doing it, I think at the end of the day, people will see through that. The media, the reporters will see through that. So if you tell as a CEO or a company a nice story, yeah, we take care of the world, but in all your actions you don't, people will see that. I say sometimes, some years ago I introduced this 4 or 5 consistency rule, the law of 4 or 5. And what I mean is, if you have a vision, if you have an opinion, the world should go that direction, and I have one, then 4 out of my 5 decisions need to be totally in sync with that. Why 4 out of 5? 4 out of 5, it's 2 out of 5, I lose my credibility, and some companies do. It's a minority. 3 out of 5 is just a majority of your decisions. 4 out of 5 is the majority of your decisions. That leaves, of course, the audience with the question, why not 5 out of 5? Well, running a business, running a country is not a religion. And I realize that sometimes you need to be pragmatic. Never where it involves your deep values, never. There you have 5 out of 5. But sometimes, of course, you need to be pragmatic. But
Can you name an example of where you had to be pragmatic?
Well, can we even go further in our waste reduction than we do today? Yeah, if I invest a couple of more billions, I can move faster maybe with my CO2 reductions than I do today. But if I invest more billions, then I will hardly exist anymore. So I will do it with a certain speed, and I try to maximize there. I try to maximize the speed, but also sometimes within some limitations. So sometimes you cannot achieve everything at the same moment you want to achieve it, because you need to serve other interests as well. But if you only tell the story and don't move, your question or example, I think you cannot do that. You will lose the credibility, and people and media and whatever will see through that. So I think it's not a good strategy. And by the way, it is a little bit a problem, because next week we have Davos, where the 2,000-3,000 important people of the world and myself are coming together. It's a weird setting there, but nevertheless, it's very nice. And there will be companies there telling the right story, and they will be questioned by other people. Are you doing it also? And that is important. And I have a great trust in your generation. Therefore, you quoted a speech of me before. I have a trust, a belief, a hope, I don't know, all of them, in the next generation, in the millennials, in the people in this room, the people in this university, that they will vote with their feet. And if companies don't move, they will not work there anymore. If companies don't move, they will not buy their products anymore. That is what I hope.
And when
But
talking
it is
about
your generation who decides about that, but I would hope that.
when we're talking about this balance between, or this relation between companies and customers or users, do you think that the responsibility of the climate responsibility, do you think that's mainly in the hand of the customers that create the demand, or in the hands of the companies that meet those demands?
No, it is both. Customers is a weird phenomenon. Customers are people like us who at certain moments of our day or life are customers. At other moments of our life we are voters. At other moments of our life we are citizens. We talk about the same people, us. But the way we vote for political parties, the way we shout, speak, argue as citizens, is not always the same way as we consume and buy our products as customers. And therefore we sometimes make a weird or strange connection in our head that we behave differently and not consistently, at least not 4 out of 5 in all of our decisions we take every single day. So it is not that consumers will therefore determine it only. The companies, customers have difficulty to pay for sustainability, to pay for better produced products, etc. People found that difficult, and I understand it also. Not everybody can afford, etc., etc. So therefore, companies, therefore also governments, need to take their responsibility as well. So I don't push the responsibility for this to the future workforce, to customers, but also not only to companies. I think all have their responsibility.
And when talking to the Dutch talking about the Dutch case when there were climate agreement negotiations in the Netherlands, and a few organizations actually quitted the negotiations, including Greenpeace.
Yeah.
And they said, and I quote, they quitted because of a lack of concrete carbon pricing for industrial companies, and secondly, the unfair distribution of climate costs between citizens and companies. So, and also according to the Central Research Center of Statistics, companies account for 78% of the CO2 emissions, while on the other hand, households account for 22%. So do you partly agree with Greenpeace that companies are not doing enough right now?
Maybe I will say something about that in Buitenhof next Sunday.
Why not here?
And here also, right now. Well done. To be honest, I don't fully understand the whole debate in the Netherlands as we speak. I think most of the people in this audience would have the impression that companies do not want to have a price on carbon. That is not true. The majority of the companies want to have a price on carbon. I lead 80 companies in the so-called CEO Climate Alliance of the World Economic Forum, 80 companies, including many big Dutch companies, who are advocating a price on carbon. We even put a number on that. I'm leading globally, together with the Canadian Environmental Minister, a global alliance for the World Bank and the IMF and the UN on putting a price on carbon. I think we need to put a price on carbon. The strange thing is, we have already a price on carbon in Europe, so-called ETS system. Most of the Dutch companies fall under that regime.
Yeah.
What did we do in Europe? We installed the carbon price and we said we get so many credits. It's not the taxation, but the good companies are being paid by the bad companies. The bad need to pay to the good. So there is a driving force to reduce, there's a financial incentive, your emissions. In the beginning, we gave so many rights that nobody needed to reduce. Especially the French negotiated very well. They got an awful lot of rights. The price of carbon dropped below 5. So hardly any interest anymore. What we are now doing in Europe is we're withdrawing every week carbon emission rights. The price went up in the last 12 months from 5 to above 20. We need a price for sure above 30 to have companies reacting. And I don't fully understand if that is our European system, if most of our politicians want to work in a European context, why are we not driving faster that European price up to 30 plus instead of getting a layered system in which we have a carbon price in Europe, but another carbon price in the Netherlands, and maybe then the province of North Holland finds also something in the city of Amsterdam, south. I mean, I don't understand that. That is not easy for companies, and I understand the companies who are not happy with a layered system. But it is not true that companies do not want to have a price on carbon. And a price on carbon, and I asked, what is it, 2 years ago, Stern and Stiglitz, the Nobel Prize winner, to work out for us what kind of price of carbon would it be one of the most efficient systems to drive the emissions down? The answer is yes. And what kind of price do we need? Towards 50 and maybe later on 100. That would change companies. Then I did a poll with a lot of companies, and they said themselves, without names, but they said themselves, above 30 we start to react forcefully ourselves. So I think, simple. Drive up that European price above 30 and you will see the reactions and the companies will pay or improve. Now some people say, no, they need to pay. No, I say they need to improve. And if they don't improve, they need to pay. What we want is, we don't want their money, we want their improvement, I hope.
Okay, thank you. Is there somebody from the audience who wants to ask a question? Freek, can you... Perfect.
Yes, thank you. I'm together with Nigel, we are actually starting a company for quality control for plastics. And we were actually shocked by the fact that there was a really unprofessional market when we did some market research. And my question actually to you is, what do you think will happen? Will there be a consolidation or a shakeout of companies in the upcoming years for the recycling industry?
Recycling of plastic.
Yes, recycling of plastic.
Plastic is a great product invented 50, 60 years ago on big scale to replace other materials we were short of. And nobody thought at that moment in time, what do we do with the waste and where it will end up. So in the meantime, we have a lot of plastic in the world. And in the meantime, we realized that plastic is found everywhere in packaging and whatever, in clothing. And if you take the plastic out of this hole, including all of you, it looks very strange in this room right now. So it is a material which we have used abundantly. And we need to think that it's not a bad material in itself, but we need to think how the circularity works and where we ended up. Single-use plastic, I think we should reduce. The use of plastic in packaging, we should and can reduce. The supply, so-called, of plastic via rivers to the oceans, we should stop that. And I'm working with the ocean cleanup, as you know, Boy and Slat, to work on those things, to clean up the ocean. We still have a few years to go because the plastic was invented 50, 60 years ago. It's becoming slowly in the ocean microplastic. If it is microplastic, if we wait another 50 years, it will be in all our fish and therefore in ourselves. It's already happening today. So I am advocating a total redesign of our total plastic use and chain. Sorry.
I see the relevance, of course.
Yeah.
That's really the point. But
Sorry.
the fact that IKEA is now investing billions of euros, what does it say? What does it say about the behavior of how the industry will change in the upcoming years? Do you have any vision, or do you have any expectation or prediction value in that sense?
The big plastic producers of the world announced, I think this week, or was it already announced? Yeah. They announced this week an initiative, I think of 1.5 billion to start with, but it's money, to reduce the use of plastic and to change the supply chain of plastics. And I think the plastic industry themselves is increasingly understanding that it cannot continue as we are doing. It's really harmful for us, for society. And therefore all the companies, like I understood yourself, for working on system changes or innovations are very much needed. And I foresee that in the coming years, we will reduce the use of plastic. We will redesign the value chains that we can reuse it and not throw it away. And by the way, we need a lot of technology and a lot of innovations. By the way, the big problems of the world will also be solved by our innovations. If I take one example, it's not plastic, but it is a chemical. The biggest landfill in the United States is carpets. After you've done with your carpet, carpet consists out of 5 different chemicals, the top layer, the adhesive layer, and the lower level. And you cannot take out the different chemicals anymore. That is very complicated and very costly process. So what can you do with a carpet? You can landfill it, put it in the ground, make a mountain or dig a hole and put it in there. If in 400 or 500 years people start digging in the soil of the United States, they will not find pyramids, they will find carpets. And I said, okay, that's also interesting what we found of our previous people who lived here. Because it's too complicated. We said as a company, if you could make it of one chemical, still a chemical, but if you can make it from one chemical, then you can endlessly recycle it. Because then when the carpet is done, you put it again in the same machine, and since you don't need to split the chemicals anymore, you can reuse it endlessly. Technology-wise, innovation-wise, very complicated. We worked 6 years on it, and we solved halfway doesn't work, it's too complicated. And at the end we found the key, and now we can do that, and we will start to introduce that. So there are more of those innovations, I think, possible, and where I have a good trust also is that some of the problems, not all, some of the problems in the world will be solved by innovation, by technologies as well. And we need young companies. You have a company, as I understood, or will have a company. Okay.
Okay, I think it's
Continue.
good that we move on. We talked a lot about social and climate responsibility and the corporations that have to do with them, but we want to finish off about talking about a CEO's responsibility as well. You have arguably a decent bit more external positions than the typical CEO. Why do you have so many external positions as opposed to typical CEOs who might have one?
Is that so?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, then it is so. It's twofold. Sometimes people ask me, what is the distribution to your different roles and DSM? I said, I cannot distinct. For me, it's all the same. It's my life. Why do I have other interests and other positions? Because I'm interested in those topics, like circularity, like climate, like hunger, etc. But also I don't distinct that from DSM. In all those things which I do, it helps the company as well. I learn things, I pick up things, I get ideas. Your question about where transformations are coming from. Transformations start with having a vision. And a vision starts with people who have external contacts, travel, speak, learn, and talk with other people. And that is why I do those things. I'm advisor of the Chinese premier. Okay, great. I advise the premier of China. But I learn as much as I give to them, to be honest. I learn about China. I learn how they address carbon pricing, for example. Speaking with the Chinese environmental minister recently, I said, you can introduce a price of carbon in two ways. You can put a taxation. You can also have the bad people paying to the good people in the industry. It's a different system. There are two systems in the world. Why did you not choose for a taxation system? Why did you choose for a trading system between the bad and the good companies in China? He said to me very clearly, I don't want to have a taxation system in China. I want the bad companies to pay to the good companies. I said, interesting, why? I said, but otherwise, if a taxation system, then the governments need to enforce that. So, well, if one country that looks easy to me, it is in China. A little bit easier than in the Netherlands, to be honest. No. Then the people maybe will think another taxation, and at the end we need to pay for that. You know, so what? You tell that it's the decision of the leadership. No. We better have the industry stimulating each other. Listening to the environmental minister of China, thinking about those kind of things and thinking about, how can I say, inclusion of his measurements into the country as well. I learn a lot from those kind of things, how we can apply that and how we can deal with that in the Netherlands. So those kind of things help me a lot, bring me a lot.
We do want to touch upon your advisory position at the Chinese People Association for Friendship with Foreign Countries. I think undeniably China is moving very quickly when it comes to sustainability, but there's also an argument that there's a potential at the cost of human and ethical rights violations. How do you have conversations with these Chinese high officials about promoting sustainability, which is a good thing, while knowing that they are committing undeniable ethical and human rights violations?
Complicated topic. Struggle. Don't have the right or the only answer on that. The political and organizational system in China is of course totally different than ours. And with also things which we don't like at all. It's difficult.
Do you talk about it sometimes?
We talk about it, but it's difficult, although Dutch people like it, to do that with your finger and to say, I tell you not to do. That's not always the way it works. And
What would be the best way to do it?
how to transition things, to seduce, to discuss, to understand. China developed as it developed also for a reason. It did not drop out of the blue sky. And if you look where the country came from, how the country developed, it has a reason, it has a history. You cannot look only to China, by the way, not to any country in the world, by saying, I don't like things of the current system, but I have a total disrespect where it came from. History, and it's being taught here in the university also broadly, history is important. Things developed for a reason. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, but it developed for a reason. If you have no interest in the reason, then you miss the point. So I try to have interest. It's very interesting to see how the drive of China is on sustainability. Sometimes faster and harder and better than we do in Europe. China can complain. If I see the recent debate in the Netherlands about our climate treaty, China could come here and to say, let me teach you. They don't. They don't come here and say, let me teach you. I think we won't like it either. So I think the best is to have an understanding of each other. Does China need to have a lot of changes and a lot of reforms and a lot of adaptations? And are there things that I don't like? Yes. And I like very much this country. And this country is close to utopia, I agree. But not everything is perfect either here. And
Okay.
there are many people, if you look, this country has, I don't know what the latest figure is, 500,000 people, 600,000 people who live below poverty level. So we are very rich, we are very happy, but whilst we speak, there are 600,000 people in this country, just here, 2-3 streets further than where we sit right now, who live below poverty level. Is that fair? Is that utopia? If you ask them, for sure not.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's always room for improving the world. And because time is almost up, so we have to wrap it up soon. But when looking back to the moment when you started as a CEO of DSM, so you're almost 12 years.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah. So we were wondering, you're advocating for this 3P model, you're talking to lots of people, and we were wondering, did the world fundamentally change the last 12 years? Is there growing a more sustainable mindset in the world?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. The world is not stable. The world is continuously changing. The world is not the same as 12 years ago. When I started this journey 12 years ago, many people asked me, basically already 20 years ago in the managing board, with 12 years as CEO, so what do you want to do? And I said, I want to leave a better world behind and to run a successful company. So the question is, Mr. Sijbesma, what do you want to do? Run a successful company and make a lot of money, or to make the world a better place? I said in a naive way, both. Question again, what do you want to do? Both? Okay, forget the share price. This will not be an exciting stock, people thought. Today, we have been doubling, tripling our share price since I started, and the AX is flat. So apparently, you can have financial success by making the world a little bit better. It is possible. And I think today the sentiment out there, also in the financial world, is, okay, those two things can go together. Maybe 12 years ago it was either or. Maybe today it can go together. I bet if we sit here in 12 years from now, you won't invite me anymore. This is an open invitation to myself in 12 years from now. But I hope if we sit here in 12 years from now, that the people in this room and the students say those two things has to go, will go, must go hand in hand together, and that the world has been changed again. I think the momentum on not only taking the world of which you can consume as an individual or as an organization, but a world in which you need to interact. And whilst making yourself better, you need to make the world better. I think that that model is growing attention. I don't never understand companies who say in the annual reports is that our interaction, you have those annual reports, our interactions with society. I need always to laugh. And I have a tendency in Davos to ask those people, do you interact with society? Oh yeah, we have a whole paragraph. Our interaction with society. It's interesting. They said, you don't? I said, listen, we are a part of society. It is not society is there. Yeah, I know, we know them. No, we interact. There are days we communicate with them. I mean, what the heck? You're part of society. You're part of this world. You don't interact with them. You belong to it as well.
Okay. We unfortunately are going to wrap up the interview. But before we applause for Mr. Sijbesma, I want to say a short thing is that we as Room for Discussion are looking for new interviewers again. So the application rounds are open right now. So if you're interested, please look at the website or at the Facebook page. And then now give a very warm round of applause for Mr. Sijbesma.
Mag ik laatste ding zeggen?
Yeah, sure.
One last thing. First of all, compliments to the two of you. We were just discussing how often do you do this, and I really appreciate the interview and your questions, so compliments to the two of you. And also compliments to this university, this institution, all of you here, of taking the time in your lunch break to come here, to reflect maybe, to get some thoughts which can be triggering in your life. I think in this type of dialogues, we need to develop ourselves. So I have a great respect for this institution, the academic basis, and that we, in interaction, in dialogues with each other, try to make progress. And I really appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.